welcome to the deep dive.
Hello.
Today, we're diving into maybe one of the most iconic ideas from Germanic mythology, Valhalla.
That's right, the legendary Hall of the Fallen. So many people have heard the name.
Yeah, but the actual details, what it was really like in the myths, that can be, well, a bit fuzzy sometimes.
Exactly. It's this powerful image, but, the specifics from the original sources, they often get lost in, popular versions.
And for this deep dive, we're sticking entirely to the material you provided us, specifically insights from a text called Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen Warriors.
And our goal, really, is to unpack what that text tells us, to get past the surface level.
Right. We want to understand what Valhalla truly was for the people who believed in it.
Yeah, who actually ended up there, what was their afterlife like, and maybe where did this whole really fascinating idea even come from?
So get ready for a trip to Asgard. We'll discover the warrior's paradise.
And maybe question if it was paradise for a certain immortal boar.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, starting with the basics. According to the source text, where is Valhalla? And what's the sort of the core idea behind it?
Okay, so the text puts it squarely in Asgard, the realm of the gods.
Right.
And even more specifically, it's part of a place called Gladsheim, which is described as Odin's own hall, his residence, within Asgard.
Gladsheim. Okay.
And the name itself, Valhalla, that gives you the main concept right there. It translates roughly to Hall of the Fallen.
Hall of the Fallen. Got it. So clearly an afterlife place.
Yep.
But for a very specific group, right? It's not like open to everyone.
Oh, absolutely not. It's exclusively for the Einherjar.
Einherjar.
Yeah, it means something like the lone fighters, or those who fight alone. These are chosen warriors, heroes.
Josenhau.
Picked right off the battlefield. By Odin himself, or sometimes by his Valkyries.
Ah, the Valkyries. Those powerful women carrying warriors away.
Those are the ones. They play a key role here.
Now, the text paints a really, really vivid picture of the hall itself. It draws heavily from one source in particular.
It does, yeah. A lot of the description comes from the Grimnismal.
Grimnismal. That's one of the poems in the Poetic Edda.
Exactly. And the Poetic Edda is, one of our absolute key sources for Norse mythology, for the myths, the legends.
So what does the Grimnismal say Valhalla looks like?
Well, it says Valhalla shines, golden, inside Gladsheim.
Golden, okay.
And the details of the building itself are pretty striking. The roof, it's supposedly made of spear shafts.
Spear shafts?
Yeah, and then covered over with shields.
Oh, okay. Spear shafts and shields for a roof. That tells you immediately this place is about war. It's for warriors.
Precisely. I mean, it's built to reflect who lives there and what they do, and the entrances are just as, remarkable.
How so?
There's a main gate in the west,
Right.
guarded by a wolf and an eagle.
Classic Odin symbols, right? Wolf and eagle.
Very much so, but it's the number of gates that's just astonishing. The text says Valhalla has 540 gates in total.
540.
Yep, 540.
That is a massive building. Why so many gates? Any idea? Maybe. Maybe so a huge army could march out really fast.
That scale, yeah, it definitely hints at its bigger purpose, which we'll get to.
Okay. And inside? What else?
Inside, the description stays pretty unique. There's a huge tree called Lurath.
Lilirath.
Yeah, and it's said to grow right up through the hall, through the middle and out the roof.
A tree growing through the home.
Mm-hmm. And the source notes this might be the same as Yggdrasil.
The world tree.
Possibly, implying, a direct link to the Great World Tree, the sort of axis of the entire Norse cosmos.
So we've got this golden hall built like a fortress, maybe rooted in the world tree itself.
Yeah.
And what about the furniture?
Well, the benches are apparently covered with the warrior's armor, when they're not wearing it.
So coats of mail instead of cushions.
Pretty much. It's a very intense vision of a home, isn't it?
Definitely. And the people living there, the Einherjar, once they arrive, what's their daily schedule? What does eternal life look like for them?
It seems to revolve around two main things: fighting and feasting.
Fighting.
Every day.
Every single day. The text mentions Odin picks half for, training. The other half apparently go to Freya's hall, Folkvanger, for her training.
Interesting division. But the fighting in Valhalla?
It's central. They battle each other fiercely. Bloody combat. Constantly testing their strength, their skills.
So it's like eternal sparring matches. But serious ones, to the death.
Yeah, basically people get killed, wounded, all of that.
Okay.
But here's the crucial afterlife detail. At the end of the day, doesn't matter how brutal it got,
They all get up.
they all return to the hall, perfectly whole, healed, and
Okay.
ready.
Ready for the other main activity, the feast.
Yeah, so it's the feast.
And this is where things get particularly memorable, maybe a little strange looking back now. Does Odin join the feast? He rules from Valhalla, right?
He's definitely there. He attends the evening feast. It's one of his main halls of power. But interestingly, he doesn't actually eat.
He doesn't eat. Nope. He gives his share of the meat to his 2 wolves, Gary and Freki.
Ah, the wolves again?
Odin himself. He just drinks mead in the hall. That's it.
Just mead for Odin.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the warriors? What are they eating to sustain this huge army?
There's a cook named Sæhrímnir,
Okay.
and he prepares the meat. And the source tells us exactly where this meat comes from, a specific animal, the boar, Sæhrímnir.
Sæhrímnir, just a boar. Sounds like a lot of work for one pig.
But see, he's not just any boar.
Oh.
The key thing, Sæhrímnir is killed every single day for the feast,
Right.
provides all the meat they need, but then he comes back to life every morning, good as new.
The immortal regenerating boar. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the maybe not so paradise part for the boar you mentioned.
Exactly. It's this perpetual self-renewing food source for the warrior's eternal party.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about the boar's perspective?
Doesn't sound great.
It really highlights how focused this afterlife is on the warrior and their needs, doesn't it? Eternal feasting, but it relies on this eternal cyclical death for the food source.
A fascinating, maybe slightly dark detail, yeah. And their drink. You mentioned Odin drinks mead. What about the Einarjar?
They drink mead too, served by the Valkyries.
Wait, the Valkyries who bring them there are also serving drinks.
Yes, the text is specific. It says a group of 13 Valkyries are directly tied to Valhalla. Their job is serving mead, looking after the warriors. It even lists some names.
Like you.
Let's see. Frist, Mist, Skigold, names like that. And the source points out these probably aren't the only Valkyries in the myths, but these 13 seem to have this specific role in Valhalla.
So specific Valkyries acting as, well, eternal waitstaff for the heroes.
Okay.
And the mead itself. Where is that coming from? Is there an immortal bartender too?
Not quite. But this is another really unique detail. It comes from a goat.
A goat.
A giant goat, actually, named Heiðrún. She lives up on the roof of Valhalla.
On the roof. With the shields.
Apparently so. And she eats the leaves of that tree, Lirath, the one growing through the hall.
Okay, eating tree leaves.
And instead of making milk, she produces an endless supply of mead from her udders.
An immortal boar for meat. A giant goat on the roof eating tree leaves and making mead. These are such specific, almost surreal images. What do you think that says about the whole belief system?
Well, it speaks to an imagination, doesn't it? Creating an afterlife perfectly suited to what a warrior culture might desire or need on Earth. Endless food, endless drink.
An endless fighting practice.
Right. And the fact that the boar and goat just keep renewing themselves, it really hammers home that idea of a truly perpetual state, a cycle that just never breaks.
It's not just the goat on the roof either, is it? There's something else up there.
That's right, yeah. There's also a great stag, Eikthrnir.
Eikthrnir.
He's up there too, also eating leaves from Lirath, and apparently the dew that drips from his antlers.
Dew from his antlers?
Yeah, it drips down and feeds into Heiðrún, which is this major primordial well or spring in Norse myth, said to be the source of tons of the world's rivers.
Wow. So the animals living on Valhalla's roof, eating from the tree inside it, are literally connected to the source of the world's rivers.
Yeah.
Incredible cosmic plumbing, kind of.
It really links this specific hall, this afterlife place, directly into the bigger map of the whole mythological world. It's quite intricate.
It is. And
Yeah.
despite these elements that might seem, fantastical or even a bit weird to us now, the source really stresses that Valhalla was taken very seriously. It was important. A place of high honor.
Deeply serious, yeah. It was the peak, the ultimate reward for a warrior's life, well lived, or rather well thought. And the numbers involved, they just keep reinforcing that scale and that sense of purpose.
What numbers are those?
Setting the Grimnismal poem again, the text says that when the time comes, when Odin calls them to battle, 800 Einherjar march out of each of Valhalla's 540 gates.
Okay, wait. 800 warriors times 540 gates.
I'll do the math.
That's 432,000 warriors.
Exactly. 432,000 elite warriors, every single one a chosen hero.
That strongly implies Valhalla isn't just a retirement home, is it? It's more like a barracks, a staging ground.
Very much seems that way. A massive elite army being kept perpetually fed, perpetually honed, presumably for some great final conflict.
Like Ragnarok. Though you said the source text we have doesn't explicitly name that here.
Right. The provided text doesn't specifically mention Ragnarok in this context, but the implication of gathering such a huge trained army is definitely there.
Okay. Now, the source also touches on how old this idea is. It mentions that while some details, like the mead goat or maybe these exact huge numbers, show up in texts around the 10th century, the basic concept of Valhalla feels older.
Yes, the name Valhalla itself and this general idea of a warrior's paradise, you can see hints earlier, maybe early 9th century.
Where?
There are things like picture stones, the Jengvide stone from Gotland in Sweden. It seems to show Odin welcoming a fallen warrior on horseback. Maybe a scene related to entering Valhalla.
So visual evidence potentially pushing it back.
Potentially, yeah. Pinpointing exactly how far back the idea goes before we have written texts is always tricky, but the concept feels ancient.
Let's dig into those origins a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Where might this belief have actually come from? The source brings up a couple of theories.
It does. One idea that gets floated sometimes is an inspiration from the Roman Colosseum.
The Colosseum, because of all the gates?
Primarily, yeah. The numerous entrances mirroring Valhalla's 540 gates. It's a visual similarity. However, the source text is pretty clear on this.
What does it say?
It says the Colosseum was definitely not the model for the actual belief in Valhalla, the core religious or mythological idea.
Okay. So maybe some poets later used the Colosseum as like a descriptive image.
Exactly. Some skalds, the poets, might have borrowed the image for descriptive flair in their poems, but the source firmly states the origin of the Valhalla belief itself. Nothing to do with Rome.
Right. It dismisses that. So what's the more likely origin according to the text?
It points to something much more, well, deeply rooted in Germanic culture itself. The widespread belief that the dead, especially important people, continue to live on inside their burial mounds.
Living on in their graves.
Yeah.
In the mound of earth piled over them.
Essentially, yes. That the mound was a dwelling place for the dead.
Okay, but how does that become a shining golden hall up in Asgard with Odin? That seems like a big leap.
Well, the theory connects it partly through the name Valhalla itself again.
How so?
The text mentions that in parts of southern Sweden there are these hills or rock formations called Valhall. And the thinking is this might come from valor, meaning fallen, and hallar or hallar, meaning rock or hill.
So Valhall could mean rock of the fallen or hill of the fallen.
Exactly. Directly linking the name to a physical burial place, a mound or hill.
The burial hill of the fallen. Okay, I see the connection now.
And then think about how important people, warriors, princes were buried.
With their weapons, armor, lots of treasure.
Right. And not just weapons, but feasting gear, too. Cups, cauldrons, provisions sometimes.
They were literally buried with all the stuff needed for a pretty comfortable life inside the mound.
Precisely. So the theory goes, this core belief in the powerful dead person residing in their splendid, wealthy mound, surrounded by their treasures, continuing some form of existence, that idea evolves.
Evolves how?
For the greatest heroes, the ones chosen by the gods, maybe that earthly mound gets transformed, elevated in the mythology, into a celestial version. A grander hall in Asgard. Still rich, still a place of feasting and honor, but now divine. A reflection of that honored grave mound, but on a cosmic scale.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It grounds this big mythological concept in a very real physical practice and belief about death and burial.
Connects the big myth back to earthly customs, yeah. And the source suggests that while the roots might be ancient and maybe widespread Germanic, the really elaborate, detailed Valhalla we read about in the Poetic Edda, that's likely a later, more developed, specifically North Germanic or Norse vision.
And we have proof that this wasn't just some obscure myth. It was genuinely important culturally, even showing up in songs about actual historical kings.
Yes, this is really powerful evidence for how much cultural weight it carried. The source mentions two specific examples. Songs about 10th century Norwegian kings, Eric Bloodaxe and Hakon the Good.
Okay, what about them?
There's a poem, the Eiríksmal, about Eric Bloodaxe. It describes his grand arrival in Valhalla after he died. He's welcomed by Odin, by other famous heroes. He's seen as like a necessary reinforcement for Valhalla's army.
And the source says his wife actually commissioned that poem.
Yes, to basically cement his status as a great hero who made it to the ultimate warrior afterlife. It was about legacy, honor.
Commissioning a Valhalla entry song. That really tells you something. It wasn't just a story, it was a status symbol, a way to frame a ruler's death as heroic.
Absolutely. And maybe even more striking is the other poem, the Hakonarmal, about Hakon the Good.
What's special about him?
Hakon was a Christian king. He'd been baptized, was known to be devoutly Christian.
Oh, Christian king.
Yes. And yet, after he died in battle, he also got a poem commissioned for him celebrating his arrival in Valhalla, being welcomed by the old pagan gods, Odin included.
Wow. Even a Christian king is celebrated as entering Odin's hall. That really shows how strong, how prestigious the idea of Valhalla still was, even as Christianity was taking hold.
It truly does. It highlights that for many people at that time, getting into Valhalla was still seen as the highest honor for a warrior. So deeply embedded in the culture that even a major religious shift couldn't just erase its importance overnight, especially in how they commemorated their heroes.
This has been, wow, a really fascinating deep dive. Okay, so let's recap a bit. We've journeyed into Valhalla's really vivid description.
Yeah, the spear-roofed hall, those 540 gates hinting at this state of constant readiness.
The surprising details like the tree, Lirath, growing right through it, linking it somehow to the bigger cosmos.
And we looked at the unique daily life of the Einherjar, that cycle of brutal fighting, then miraculous healing, then feasting together, a kind of perfect eternal loop for warriors.
Definitely tailored for them. And we explored those incredibly specific, really memorable food and drink sources.
The immortal boar Sæhrímnir, dying and reviving every day.
And the mead goat hydrant up on the roof, connecting the feast supplies right back into the mythological world itself.
We also looked at where the idea might have come from, seeing how that link to ancient beliefs about the dead living on in their rich burial mounds feels much more plausible.
Yeah, much more grounded than, say, the Roman Colosseum idea.
Right, and finally we saw real historical proof of its importance. Those songs for kings, even a Christian king, showing them entering Valhalla. It just underlines how Valhalla was viewed as the peak destination, the ultimate honor for chosen heroes in that belief system.
A symbol of the highest status.
Exactly. It was clearly much more than just a casual story. It was a central aspiration for the society's most celebrated figures.
Okay, so here's something to maybe leave you, our listener, thinking about, where it gets really interesting. If the absolute highest honor, the ultimate reward in this culture is an afterlife that's all about eternal fighting and eternal feasting, what does that tell us? What does that suggest about the core values, the priorities, maybe even the anxieties of the people who dreamed up this specific paradise?
It's worth considering, isn't it? How deeply our ideas about what comes after life are often shaped by and reflect our lives here on Earth, our hopes, our fears, what we value most.
Something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.